everybody, this is Leslie. We're back again to do another tutorial. This time we're going to do the beloved character Stitch. We're going to break down all the components to make up this little guy, and we're going to show you just how easy it is to put it together. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is take some vanilla pound cake that I have here. I love working with pound cake. Of course, this is just my preference. I love working with the pound cake when it comes to making character-based cake pops where I mold the cake pop dough versus just rolling into a ball. All right, I'm going to use my Wilton's cookie scoop to make my cake balls today. The rule in my house is 2 is 1, 1 is none. Once I get them made, I'm going to go ahead and put my cake pop dough away for the next project. I'm going to squeeze my cake pop dough. I want to try to get as many air bubbles out as possible, so I just knead it for a few minutes, and then I'm going to roll it in the natural direction that I would roll something in my hands. I'm going to squeeze and put a lot of pressure as I do that until I feel it come together in my hands. When that happens, I'm going to go backwards and be really light on the touch. And when this happens, for some reason, it comes out as a nice round ball. Now at this point, I'm going to pause the video. I pulled this image down off the internet. We can see that his head is not a round ball, but rather it's kind of cone shaped, but he has a wide mouth. So I set to task at creating the cone front for his face, keeping the back of his head more round. And I'm just using my fingertips, adding just a little pressure at a time. Now I'm looking straight down on his head. You can see the rounded part where his mouth is going to be. I'm just indenting a little bit where I'm going to put his eyes and making sure that under his chin is nice and smooth as well. I have this tool that I've got with my fondant tools. The one end is a nice flat edge, and I'm just going to create his mouth. Now I'm going to just indent it just a little bit at a time. Remember, if you push too hard too quickly, it will crack your cake pop dough. So I'm just going back and forth using my tool. I want to put a nice indent in there, because remember, we have to put a tongue in there as well as some teeth, so we need some space in order to create the room to be able to do that. So I'm just back and forth. I'm also making sure that if there's cracks on the inside, that I am smoothing them out as I go. I'm just softening the edge around his mouth so that I can continue to go a little bit deeper. I flip it upside down, and now I'm just smoothing out the cracks that are on the inside where his mouth is at. I don't want cracks in there because that could be the potential for an air bubble to form later. Now I take my lollipop stick that's already been dipped in white chocolate. I dip it in some of the blue, and I push it in and spin it clockwise at the same time until I feel it connect on the inside of the cake pop dough, and then turn it back a quarter of a turn, wipe off the excess, and put it aside so that it can dry. While that chocolate is setting up, we are going to stop the video and talk about all the elements for our stitch. Here are a lot of pictures I pulled down from the internet. Looks like we have ears that are two-toned in nature. There's blue and the light purple. There's also his eyes, the light blue, and the pupil of the eye. We have his nose, we have the tongue, and the underside of his chin is also the same color as his eyes. So we've got a lot of elements that we need to put together. So we're going to break them down into these manageable pieces so that we can do it. We're going to start with the ears. So we've got the blue that matches the melted chocolate, and we've got the purple. I have cornstarch in my container in case my modeling chocolate is a little bit on the tacky side, which of course it is because my hands are always hot. So just add a little bit, and I'm just going to flatten it out enough that I can get it through the KitchenAid pasta attachment so that it is all even in thickness. Now the blue I want much thicker because that's going to hold the shape of it. The purple is just going to be a highlight. So when I go to put that through the pasta maker, I want to make that super paper thin. As you can see on the table, that it's super thin. I want it just enough just to color it, whereas the blue is probably a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch thick, because that's going to actually hold the shape. All right, we're going to do the darker blue now. This will be the color that we use to represent his nose. We just need a little bit of it. It was made by taking some of the blue and a little bit of black and mixing it together. We're just trying to make the color just a little bit darker. Now that I got the ball formed, I'm going to grab a Sculpting tool and use the rubber end on it to create the nostrils on my Stitch's nose. And then I'm going to use that same plastic tool that we used to form Stitch's mouth. We'll use this to create the little indents at the bottom of his nose. And when that's all done, we will go ahead and put it aside, clean up our table a little bit, and prep for the next element. I'm going to grab the light blue. We're going to use the light blue for around his eyes and also the piece under his chin, but we're going to start with the piece for his eyes. I don't know if you can see, it's a little shiny, so I'm using cornstarch to take some of that tackiness out. I'm going to put it through my KitchenAid pasta attachment, and then I'm going to use a little bit of black for the pupils of his eyes. We don't need as much for that, but I want the pupils of the eyes to be super paper thin, just like we did with the purple. And I'm going to run it through my KitchenAid pasta maker. And here's some pictures just to see. Stitch has these pupils that look like football shapes, and the light blue is almost like a leaf shape, but both of them we're going to use our round icing tips to do this. So with the pupils, I'm going to use our normal number 12 icing tip, and of course we need 4 of them for our cake pops today, but we always do the extra ones. Then I'm going to take and just kind of use my fingers to create corners to both sides. So I'm just pinching the ends together, and then once I'm done, I just put them all aside. And then I'm going to use this 2A, it's a bigger Wilton's icing tip, to do the exact same thing. I need a total of 4 for our pops, but we always do the extra one. Now I'm going to create a point on one end. So I'm just going to shear off just a little bit of the edge, creating a point. So it'll give us the look of his eyes. And then I'm just going to round out the sides of it. I want to leave the point in the middle and just round out those 2 other sides. We'll lay that one aside. We'll do the second one for the set, for the one pop, and then we'll go ahead and get some water. We'll put a little bit of water. We'll use it as the glue to put the pupils on the inside of our blue. We'll grab our palette knife and go point to point, the point from the black pupil towards the point of the blue. And I'm just going to leave just a little bit of an edge of that blue the whole way around that pupil. And we'll do that for the second one. And just tap it down lightly and then push it aside. We'll finish off the other eyes, clear up our table a little bit so we have room to work on the next elements. We're going to work on his ears. Starting with the dark blue, I'm going to take a leaf cutter and I'm just going to cut out our ears. Again, we need 4 for our cake pops that we're doing today, plus the extra one. After we finish cutting them all out, we're going to clear our table. When using those metal cookie cutters where the metal pieces come together, they leave the burr, so we're just going to smooth that out. And then we're going to cut the same amount out of the purple. Again, we're going to clear the table, then we will smooth out those edges around them, just like so. And then when we're done with them, we're going to put the 2 pieces together. We're going to use a little bit of water to be the glue. So we're just going to paint the dark blue. We'll do 2 at a time so the water doesn't dry. And then we'll pick up the purple and we're just going to lay it right on the top. Line it up pretty evenly. And then just tap it down to make sure it stays in place. And we're going to smooth between them so it just seems like it's seamless. Just smooth the edges all the way around. You'll want to do this to all of them. Now when we're done, we're going to go ahead and take a tiny leaf cutter, because in Stitch's ears he has these notches On one side of his head, the notch is at a high part, and on the other side, it's down low. So we're going to do our pairs, and we're going to do one high, one low. And we'll do that to all of them. We're going to go ahead and smooth out that part that we just notched to make sure it's nice and even. And when we're done, we're going to grab that same Sculpting tool that has the rubber tip on it and just kind of score his ears. And I'm just going to run a nice little line down through so that when I go to try to bend it, because of the thick modeling chocolate, it'll actually help it to bend where it needs to go. Then I'm going to spin it around, and I'm just going to use my fingers to create that little point at the top of his ears. Before we move on, I'm going to pause the video one more time and actually pull up our picture of Stitch. Underneath the chin is what we want to focus on, and as you can see, that color of light blue that's under his chin is the same exact color that we use for around the eyes. And we're going to use a circle cookie cutter and then just cut it in half. So let's just try that. I grabbed my blue modeling chocolate and a circle cookie cutter that measures about 2¼ inches. I cut one out, and then I re-roll my blue modeling chocolate and cut a secondary one out so that I would have for both. I grabbed my palette knife and I cut it a little bit more than half. And then I'm just going to use my finger, and I want to smooth that edge down. So I'm just putting pressure to kind of smooth and stretch that out a little bit. I want to pull that chocolate, causing it to stretch just a little bit and be thin. I don't want this to be something that sticks out over the cake pop, but I want it just to really blend nicely to the cake pop. And then once I have the outside part smoothed out, I want to create a nice straight edge. So I use my palette knife and just cut that off so it's nice and smooth, and we'll put that aside. I take just a minute and create that second one and put it aside as well. Now that the elements are mostly done, we're going to go ahead and stir our chocolate because I think it's time to dip our pops. So we'll give it a good stir, making sure that it's just the right temperature. We're going to grab our cake pop, and that depression that we put in there for his mouth, we want to fill it first. We pour that chocolate down in there to try to keep any air bubbles from forming if we just dropped it into the pan. So we'll do that first, and then we'll drop it in the pan. We'll spin it as we pull it towards us just till the chocolate touches itself, and then we're going to tap it until that chocolate drips off as much as we can. Now I want to grab my palette knife because I don't want a whole lot of chocolate inside his mouth. We need to leave room for a tongue and some teeth, so I'm going to use it to gently pull that chocolate out. Be careful, be very, very careful if you're doing this. You do not want to expose the cake pop dough. So I'm just helping the excess fall out, but not pulling too much that it exposes the cake pop dough. Now when you're done doing this, you should continue to just shake that chocolate, let it gravity do its thing, let it just pull, and all the while that you're shaking it around, always make sure you're looking for those air bubbles. You need to have those air bubbles popped. If your chocolate cools down and you have air bubbles in there, you have a very high risk of those air bubbles popping and exposing your cake pop dough to oxygen. And if you have oils in your cake mix, they will leach out through the tiny bubbles that popped. So once you've done that, you can put it aside on the tray and let it get hard. We must take a break here for at least an hour, possibly two, until the chocolate on your cake pop completely dries. We need them dry in order to continue our work. After a couple of hours, it's time to put our stitch together. We're going to start with his chin. So we're going to grab our little semicircle. We're going to use some water as glue because this piece will not stick off of his body. So we'll just use some water. We're going to grab our cake pop. We're going to go ahead and lay this blue right up against the top of his bottom lip. Firmly press it in place. We're going to flip it over the other way. We're going to work right in the center first. We're going to roll that light blue down towards the stick, and then working our way from the stick outward, we're going to go ahead and flatten it down. Now it will come up on the sides, and that's okay. We'll go ahead and cut that off, but go ahead and flatten that out and then lay it up against his lip, and then just use your palette knife and cut that off so that we have a nice straight line. And go ahead then and do that to the other side. Just flatten it out the best that you can, and then use your palette knife and cut that off so we have a nice straight line right across his bottom lip. And then once you do that, just make sure that it's all cut off nice and even. Be very careful that you don't cut too far into the chocolate itself, the dark blue chocolate. Leaving a hole in there could create an issue down the road, but just gently cut off the modeling chocolate and then use your fingers then and smooth that down. When you get it to where you want it, we'll go ahead and put it over on the tray, and the next thing we're going to do is create his tongue. So I grabbed some pink modeling chocolate, and I'm going to use the same cutter that we used for his ears and cut out a tongue. Cut off the bottom rounded piece. Now this chocolate is nice and thick. I'm just going to smooth the edge and add a little bit of water. It's going to stick inside his mouth, so it'll have a lot of access points to touch, so I don't have to worry about using chocolate. I can just use water as glue. Go ahead and push it inside as far as you can get it back in there, and just smooth out the edges. I'm going to take that same rubber tipped tool and put that crease down the center of his tongue. This also gives me the opportunity to push down the edges inside there so that it's not sticking out anywhere. I'm going to grab his eyes, flip them over. We're going to use water as glue for our eyes, so we'll just put a little bit on each one of them. Okay, then we're going to grab our palette knife. We're going to pick up our eye. We're going to lay it right above his nose. Remember, we need to leave room for his nose in there. And then we'll do the other one. We're going to leave about 1/4 of an inch gap between the two eyes, keeping the point down towards the tongue. I'm going to grab my palette knife. I've got a little bit of blue melted chocolate on there, and I'm going to put a dab of it right between the eyes where the points are of the eyes. I'm going to grab my nose and I'm going to put it on. We use chocolate here because the nose actually does stick off of the cake pop. It gives that little extra reinforcement so that it doesn't get bumped and fall off. It just has a better connection. And then after we do that, we're going to take our rubber tipped Sculpting tool and fix the nostril holes. I squeezed it a little bit too hard, so I just want to fix it. I'll grab my palette knife and pull off any excess wet chocolate that I squeezed out when I was putting the nose on. I'll set the cake pop on the tray until I switch out my chocolate. I need the blue. We're going to grab his ears. Now, because the ears stick off of the cake pop, we want to have that extra little bit of glue, so we're going to use chocolate. And we'll pick up the ear, we'll put chocolate on, and then we will attach it to the side of his head. We'll have to hold it there for just a moment until the chocolate starts to connect. And then I'll use my palette knife and pull off any excess chocolate that may have squeezed out from underneath the ear. I'll put it back on the tray. I'll grab the other ear. We'll do the exact same thing. We'll use some chocolate. We'll grab my cake pop off the tray again. We'll try to line up the ears the best that we can. We'll attach that to the side. Again, we'll have to hold it for just a minute. And then I'll smooth it out, grab my palette knife, and again pull off any excess chocolate that seemed to squeeze out from underneath the ear. We're going to go ahead and set our cake pop on the tray and pause this video for just 1 minute and pull Stitch back up so we can take a look at him. Above his eye, he's got this little black line that accentuates his eyelid. We're going to use that, but I totally forgot to hit the record button to show you that I used my extruder with the little tiny holes in it to create these little pieces of chocolate that we will use to outline the top of his eyelid. So we'll grab one little strand and we're going to roll it out, make sure it's all nice and straight. And we're going to cut the very tip off, and then I'm going to use about 1/2 inch. I will cut that first one and use that one then to guide the mark where I need to cut the rest of them. I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it in my hand, and what I want to do is just bring each end to a point. So I'm just adding the little point on each end. And we'll grab our paintbrush because we're going to just use some water to glue this around his eyes, and right where the light blue connects to the dark blue, we'll just add a little bit of water. And then I'll use my palette knife. These things roll all over the place all the time, so use that palette knife, and then we'll just add it as an eyebrow or something to separate and accentuate his eyes. Just like that. I'm going to use my palette knife just to take the points of the black chocolate and help it to flow into the other colors. We'll do the same for the other eye. And again, use the palette knife to help attach it in a very nice and smooth way. We'll set our cake pop on the tray, clean up our table just a little bit, grab our tray and our poppy paint. We're going to use some white. It's time to put the spark in Stitch's eye. We only need just a drop of our poppy paint. Make sure that you wipe that top off because it will stick to the inside of your cap and the plastic piece will come off inside the cap when it dries. We just want a little bit of white and just a dab will do. And all of a sudden our Stitch comes to life. And we'll do the same on the other side. And we'll just take a little bit and put a light reflection on his nose. And all of a sudden our Stitch comes to life. He looks so darn cute. It's time to swap out the blue chocolate for the white chocolate because we need to put some teeth on our Stitch. I'm going to flip Stitch upside down so that I can work on the bottom ones first. I load up my paintbrush and then use a back and forth motion and pull. That'll bring a point to the chocolate. On the second one, I actually had too much chocolate on my paintbrush and it got too far back in. I used my palette knife and I pull the excess chocolate out and I redo it. It's super easy when the chocolate is still wet. I double up on that first one, going back and forth, and then pull it as the chocolate on the bottom layer dries, and you add another one on top of it. It just creates a taller tooth. So I go ahead and do the one that I messed up originally, back and forth and pull. I noticed that my chocolate is starting to cool quickly, so I want to give it a good stir and try to get the chocolate all even temperature enough that I can get through making these teeth. Now on to the other side, we'll go ahead and put a tooth on this side of his tongue. Again, back and forth and then pull. Grab some more chocolate out of the pan and back and forth and pull. Flip over your Stitch and let's go ahead and put his incisors in. Again, it's load your paintbrush, back and forth and pull. And as you can see, the teeth just start to grow. We'll do both incisors first, back and forth and pull until we reach the desired size that we want. Okay, after we do his incisors again, we're going to go ahead and do his front teeth. We'll do one on each side. So he has 2 front teeth, then his incisors, and now we're going to do a tooth on the opposite side of the incisors along the back of his jaw, one on each side. And then we're going to hit those spots one more time to try to get a little bit more size to his teeth. So back and forth and pull, do those incisors one more time. And it'll just stretch it out, bring it to a nice point. And there we go. I think I'm satisfied with the way he looks. He looks so cute. I know you guys can do this. We've pulled all the pieces of Stitch apart into manageable bite sizes, and whenever you pull it apart like that, it makes it so much easier to accomplish the goal of creating these character-based cake pops. I'm so glad you're here, but now it's your turn. It's time for you to be creative.